Hi everyone, I just wanted to touch base with you now that you've had a chance to go over project number 2 and familiarize yourself with what it is that you're going to need to be doing. So one of the first things that you might have noticed when you were looking over the project was that you're going to have to develop quite an extensive research packet. So just my general tips to you with that would be to really make sure that you go through each one of the steps to really kind of go through that list and make sure that you've done everything in the proper order. And also to, this would be a good point while you're developing this and going through this research packet, that if you're finding yourself confused at that point, that this would be a good time to come and see me, or to schedule a video conference to clarify any concerns or questions that you're having at that point. The idea behind creating this research packet is so that you'll have all of the material and all of the analysis and stuff that you need to have done before moving forward to actually writing. And so it's a really good, if you wait until you're writing the paper to kind of realize that you didn't really understand some of what it was that you were supposed to do, it's kind of late. It's better to address those things earlier, right? So I just want you to be aware of that. The other thing you might have noticed as you were going through Project 2 is that you're going to be interviewing somebody to gather some information. Now, some of you may have done this before. Probably most of you haven't. So I just kind of wanted to briefly go over some basic concepts to keep in mind while developing some interview questions. So the Wayne Writer does discuss interviewing a little bit in a couple of pages. So I just wanted to go over a couple of things. The number one thing to kind of remember when you're developing an interview question is not to ask a yes or no question. Because if somebody can just answer yes, that doesn't give you the material and enough material and information that you're going to need to really develop your essay. So this is more just a matter of phrasing your questions. So for an example of this would be, instead of asking, does your discourse community use certain words or phrases that the general population wouldn't understand, that could be just answered yes or no. You would want to ask something like, what words or phrases does your discourse community use that the general population wouldn't understand, right? So that kind of question is more open-ended and would allow, it would kind of prompt the person that you're interviewing to answer that question more fully, giving you a lot more details and information. The other thing I kind of wanted to kind of suggest to you is that you're supposed to come up with 6 interview questions for your blog post, for the next blog post. And a really good way of doing this would be to make sure that you've developed one question for each one of Swales's criteria. You may not end up discussing each one of the criteria in your paper, but by asking your interviewee a question about each one of the criteria, that'll really let you know which ones of the criteria are the most important, which ones of the criteria are the ones that fit this discourse community, and maybe which ones don't fit as well. So you may only talk about 2 or 3 of the criteria in your paper, and that would probably be based on, the information that you've gotten from this interview. So I think a good strategy would be to ask one question per criteria at least. The other thing that you should know when you're doing these interview questions is that you should be putting the questions into your own words. So for an example would be, if you asked somebody, what particular, lexis do you use within your discourse community, chances are they're not going to understand what lexis means. They won't know what that word means. So you're going to have to kind of change Swales's, or you're going to have to word Swales's criteria using your own words, right? So an example would be when you say, what words or phrases do you use, instead of using the word lexis, right? You kind of let them know what that word means. So that might be a little tricky for you because Swales's criteria are fairly dense. There's a lot of vocabulary and a lot of jargon in that. But I think that if you go ahead, if you make sure that you watch the presentation on Swales' Concept of Discourse Community that's available on Echo Center, you should have a pretty good understanding of what each one of those criteria means, and then be able to write those questions using your own words. So if you're finding that you're struggling as you're writing your research questions, a good idea would be to maybe go back and watch that presentation over again. And while you're watching the presentation, come up with the questions that you would ask, using your own words. And if you've done that, a couple of times and you're still struggling, go ahead and email me and ask me for some clarification with anything that you're still confused about, okay? So other than that, I just wanted to give you a little bit of a heads up that we're going to be moving a little bit more quickly. You may have noticed that when you've gone through this next unit. We're going a little bit more quickly through Project 2 than we did with Project 1. We spent about 4 weeks on Project 1, and we're only spending 3 weeks on Project 2. So that's just, you can kind of take note of that and just be sure that you keep up with all of the hey kitty, with all of the deadlines and due dates that are scheduled throughout the course materials. Okay, so all right, thanks a lot. Bye.